So you mentioned the prefrontal cortex, and which I connect with the rational, logical part of our being. And I always mix up some of the parts of the brain, so please correct me if I'm off. But I think of the emotional center is the amygdala. Am I
Yeah.
so does that emotional center, tying it back to the crisis and feedback, is it constructive? Do I look at it as a negative or positive? The crisis, is the sky falling, etc. It seems like the emotions would also be, is that also inside of behind the veil of that mindset?
Yeah, this is, and I love that you're exploring here. And just for full disclosure, I'm kind of an amateur neurologist, right? So I'm not an expert, but this is the next frontier for leadership science is the mind. And so I'm doing some really deep dives right now on these topics. I'll bring up some of the things that I'm learning. But what from a mindset perspective, what researchers have found is that we kind of have two memory systems. One is a rapid fire memory system, one is a slow building memory system. So for example, if I had you reflect upon your last vacation, is there a memory that stands out to you? Right.
Hmm.
So when you do that, what you're doing is you're activating memory that's stored in your fast firing memory system. Because the only way to activate that memory is if you're initiated to go back to that. If you're not initiated to go back to that, you're never going to go back to it. But when you activate it, it's almost like you're there again. You could smell the smells, you can hear the sounds, like it's a really rich memory. And that's not where our mindsets reside. Our mindsets reside in our slow building memory system. So, based upon multiple interactions in the past, such as, I'll give you an example. My wife, when she was 2 years old, her brothers made her watch the movie It. So now she is deathly afraid of clowns, like literally deathly afraid of clowns. I grew up in Utah going to rodeos in the summer, and I see clowns as being these fun rodeo people. So when we see clowns, what's going on is we're activating this slow binding memory system of past experiences that has caused us to see those pieces of information in unique ways. And we could categorize all of this into different sets of mindsets, which I'm sure we'll get into. So that being said, what is going on is we've got different levels of our brain, and to simplify things, we've got what is generally referred to as the mammalian or the lizard brain. And this is kind of the right off of our brain stem. There's the amygdala, there's the hippocampus, and there's a couple of other pieces there that are more this mammalian brain. Whereas the outer rim of the brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, to your point, is the rational side of our brain. This is the more mature and evolved brain. And so both of these parts of the brain seem to tap into these memories, to the slow binding memory system. And so emotions, I guess what I would say is emotions don't necessarily play a role. Emotions are a byproduct of how these two mechanisms of the brain are working together. So where I've been currently diving into this is looking at what is the role that trauma plays in people's mindsets over the period of their life. And it's really fascinating. And what research has found is that trauma, and I'll give you, this is a phrase that I picked up actually reading a book this morning, affects our window of tolerance. So a window of tolerance is how open are we, for example, to new ideas, new experiences, uncertainty, things like that. So people who have gone through trauma, they have a smaller window of tolerance generally than those people who have not gone through trauma. And so what this means is, in terms of these two systems of the brain, the mammalian and lizard-like brain is hyperactive relative to this rational brain. And so the mammalian and lizard-like brain can overload, and the information doesn't even get past that to our prefrontal cortex, which is where the more positive mindsets really need to function. Because the more positive mindsets are generally intentional mindsets. And so what happens is when a situation occurs that activates this lizard-like or mammalian part of the brain, it's our capability of controlling that shapes our emotions, if that makes sense. So it's our emotions don't necessarily shape our mindsets. It's this lizard and mammal-like brain that then activate emotions and activate the degree to which we can control those based upon kind of the strength of our lizard brain to our more rational brain. And if those aren't in balance effectively, then we're going to have a really hard time with regards to being intentional with our mindsets.
Have